It's just before 3 a.m. on a freezing December night in 1978 at New York's JFK Airport. The sprawling cargo terminal is quiet, almost sleepy. But inside Lufthansa's high-security vault, millions of dollars in untraceable cash and jewels are waiting. A storm is brewing, not in the sky, but in the criminal underworld of New York City. This is the story of the Lufthansa Heist, one of the most audacious and infamous robberies in American history. A heist so massive, it would become the stuff of legend, immortalized in films and folklore, and leave a bloody trail that the Mafia would spend years trying to cover up. So, how did a small crew of mob associates pull off a nearly $6 million score that's over $28 million today right under the noses of the authorities at one of the world's busiest airports? The answer lies with a man named Louis Werner. Werner wasn't a gangster, he was a cargo agent for Lufthansa. But he had a serious problem, a gambling debt of $20,000 owed to a bookie with dangerous connections. To clear his name, he offered up something far more valuable than cash: inside information. He knew the inner workings of Lufthansa's cargo operation, the security protocols, the delivery schedules, everything. Werner's bookie, Martin Krugman, a wig shop owner and mob associate, saw the potential immediately. This wasn't just a tip, it was a blueprint for the score of a lifetime. But a plan this big needed muscle and a mastermind. Krugman took the idea to the one man in Queens who could make it happen: Jimmy Burke, a legendary Lucchese crime family associate. Burke was known for his charm, his generosity, and his ice-cold ruthlessness. He was a hijacker by trade, a genius at planning complex robberies. For Jimmy the Lufthansa vault was the ultimate prize. Burke began assembling his crew. This wasn't a job for just any street toughs. He needed precision, discipline, and loyalty. He handpicked a team of trusted associates, including his own son, Frank James Burke, and notorious figures like Tommy DeSimone, a man whose violent and unpredictable nature was as famous as his criminal skills. Other key players included Angelo Seep, a rising star in the Lucchese family, and several others who specialized in intimidation and getaway driving. The plan was meticulous. They studied the layout of the cargo terminal, the timing of the security guard shifts, and the exact procedure for handling high-value shipments. The target was a specific monthly shipment of currency from Germany, used to service American military personnel and tourists. The night of the heist, December 11, 1978, the crew moved with chilling efficiency. A black Ford Econoline van pulled up to the Lufthansa cargo building. The men, masked and armed, used bolt cutters to snap the padlock on the gate. Once inside, they rounded up the handful of night shift employees with surprising speed. One of the first things they did was identify the senior cargo agent, the only person with the keys and combination to the two-door vault system. The robbers knew his name. They knew details about his family. This wasn't random violence, it was calculated psychological pressure. The terrified employee quickly complied. Inside the vault, the crew found exactly what Werner had promised: stacks upon stacks of untraceable American currency and a box of jewels. They worked fast, loading heavy canvas bags filled with cash into their van. The entire operation took just 64 minutes. Before leaving, they warned the employees not to call the police for at least 15 minutes, giving them a crucial head start. They drove off into the pre-dawn darkness, melting away into the labyrinth of Queens. The largest cash robbery in U.S. history had just been executed, and at first light, the authorities would have absolutely no idea who was responsible. The morning after, news of the heist sent shockwaves through New York City and law enforcement agencies across the country. The scale was unprecedented. The FBI immediately took the lead, suspecting organized crime from the get-go. The problem was, there was no physical evidence. No fingerprints, no witnesses who could identify the masked men, just a single, well-organized hole where nearly $6 million used to be. The getaway van was found just a few days later, but it had been professionally cleaned and wiped down, offering no clues. For Jimmy Burke and his crew, this should have been the moment of triumph. They had pulled off the perfect crime. But this is where the story takes a dark and bloody turn. The success of the heist became its own undoing. The first rule of a successful robbery is to lay low. Don't flash the cash. Don't draw attention. But Burke's crew couldn't resist. One member, Parnell Stacks Edwards, who was supposed to dispose of the getaway van, instead got high, parked it in a no-parking zone, and left it for the police to find. This was the first loose end. Jimmy Burke didn't tolerate loose ends. Stacks Edwards was the first to go. He was found shot in his apartment just a week after the heist. This kicked off a brutal and systematic purge. Burke, consumed by paranoia, believed that anyone who could connect him to the robbery was a liability. The immense media attention and the intense FBI investigation made him jittery. He feared someone would crack under pressure and talk. So, one by one, the people involved in the heist started disappearing or turning up dead. Martin Krugman, the bookie who brought the plan to Burke, vanished without a trace. Tommy DeSimone, the volatile enforcer, also disappeared, though his death was likely a combination of his role in the heist and retaliation for other unsanctioned mob killings he had committed. The body count kept rising. Over the next 6 months, nearly a dozen people connected to the heist, either directly or indirectly, met violent ends. It was a terrifying display of mafia power and Jimmy Burke's cold-blooded paranoia. He was erasing the crime by eliminating everyone who knew about it. The FBI was building a list of suspects, and Burke's name was at the top, but they had no one willing to testify. The wall of silence, enforced by fear, was impenetrable. The break in the case finally came from an unlikely source, Henry Hill. Hill was a longtime associate of Burke and the Lucchese family, and his life story would later be the basis for the classic faux masters Goodfellas*. While not directly involved in the heist itself, he was part of Burke's inner circle and knew all the players. In 1980, Hill was arrested on a separate narcotics charge and, facing a long prison sentence, he realized he was just another loose end that Burke might decide to tie up permanently. He decided to save his own life by becoming an informant. Henry Hill's testimony was the key that unlocked the entire conspiracy. He laid out the entire structure of Burke's crew, explained how the heist was planned, who was involved, and, most importantly, detailed the gruesome string of murders that followed. He gave the FBI the inside story they had been desperately searching for. His cooperation led to numerous arrests, including that of the mastermind himself, Jimmy "the Gent" Burke. However, despite Hill's extensive testimony, prosecuting the Lufthansa heist itself proved incredibly difficult. With most of the perpetrators dead and the money never recovered, there was little concrete evidence to present in court for the robbery. Louis Werner, the inside man, was the only person ever convicted for the heist itself. He served his time and faded into obscurity. But for Jimmy Burke, justice came in a different form. While he was never convicted for the Lufthansa robbery or the murders that followed, Henry Hill's testimony helped convict him on other charges, including his involvement in a separate murder. Jimmy "the Gent" Burke, the architect of America's greatest cash heist, would die in prison in 1996 from cancer, never again to breathe the air as a free man. The stolen millions were never found, believed to have been laundered, spent, or buried in secret locations known only to men who are now long gone. The Lufthansa heist remains a chilling masterpiece of criminal planning and a brutal cautionary tale. It demonstrates the peak of the mafia's power in 20th century America, and the self-destructive paranoia that ultimately brought it all crashing down. It was a crime that created legends, inspired Hollywood, and left a trail of bodies that painted a grim picture of life inside the mob. The treasure may be lost forever, but the story of that cold December night at JFK continues to fascinate and horrify us to this day. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this dive into criminal history as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the dark side of history. Let me know in the comments what other infamous crimes you'd like to see covered. See you next time.